Hello and welcome back to ID Boxing with me, your host Rob Tebbutt. Delighted as always to be joined by the one and only Mr. Andy Clarke. Before we get started today, just like to remind everybody to please like, comment and subscribe. Turn your notifications on, please, so you can get more boxing content. Andy, always a pleasure to catch up with you. Thanks for popping in today. We're going to run through this past weekend and have a look ahead to what's to come this weekend with Teofimo Lopez. But before we do that, how are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, no complaints. Been a nice little passage of play, if you like, the last few weeks. Been up to some interesting things. TalkSport got the rights for Usyk Joshua, which was great. I found myself in the unusual and, on the face of it, good, but in reality bad position of actually getting the opportunity to go with two different places. Obviously, you end up having to let one side down, but they were very good about it. So, yeah, just excited about that, really. Excited about that because a few weeks ago I wouldn't necessarily have thought it would happen because I didn't think that TalkSport would necessarily go for it because they did Fury White and, you know, they've got the World Cup coming up and they've got all sorts of stuff going on. So I thought maybe this would be one I would have to sit out, but from kind of mid-July I realised that with somebody I'd be over there. So yeah, I'm buzzing about that.
Yeah, it's good. I think everybody's like, I've spoken to people over the last 6 weeks or so and sort of said, "Are you going to Saudi?" And they've gone, "Yeah," and then a couple of weeks said, "No, I'm not sure." And,
Yeah.
It depends on where it is.
Yeah.
So, but look, really glad that you'll be joining us out there. Of course, we've just filmed our Usyk Joshua 2 preview with the one and only Barry Jones. Thankfully, he's gone now. But anyway, look out for that on ID Boxing's channels coming to you Fight Week. But before we get to Fight Week, let's go back and review this past weekend's action. I was in the sunny Steel City of Sheffield. Not too many times that you can say that about Sheffield, but it was nice there to see Dalton Smith claim the British Super Lightweight title with a 6-round stoppage win over Sam O'Mason. What did you make of his performance, Andy?
It was pretty much what I expected to happen because O'Mason, former English champion, but hadn't boxed for, well, he had a fight against Serjan Bomo, but that was his first fight for nearly 3 years because he'd been out for the entire pandemic, hadn't he? And I remember covering a couple of his fights really early in his career, and he was a good, slick, well-drilled, well-schooled fighter, southpaw. But you just always felt that Dalton would be too, who's also a very well-drilled, well-schooled, technically sound fighter, would be too strong for him, and that's exactly what happened. I thought O'Mason gave as much as he could give. You know, he could have called it a day earlier, I guess, if he'd been so inclined. But I think he gave us decent value. It's just that Dalton Smith is better than him. It's as simple as that. And it was a great night for him because it was Sheffield against Sheffield. You could argue that the board, should they really have okayed that match? I don't know. What I was covering Harlem Eubank a couple of weeks ago, so the weekend before, and I know that he was very frustrated that when Akeem Ennis-Brown pulled out against Dalton Smith because they were put together for the vacant title, he was frustrated that he didn't then get the call, and even more frustrated when he saw that Sam O'Mason did get it. And I could totally understand the point that he was making. But big week for Dalton, home crowd, headlining a show. You want to show your promoter and the boxing public that you can carry a show at that kind of stage of your career. And we've all thought for a long time since he turned pro, I saw him in the amateurs, that he's got the ingredients that you need to have a chance of really doing something. And it's just great to win a British title. All fighters want to do it, and that's genuinely true. They do all want to do it. Big names who missed out due to circumstances, they do look back and say, God, I wish I'd been able to win a British title. So it's a big deal. That belt is still a big deal, and I hope it always stays like that.
Just expand on that, because obviously when Dalton turned over, I think quite a few people were surprised that he didn't stay amateur and try and go to the Olympics, for example, or take on some of those, you know, those bigger events that you get as an amateur. Excuse me. We've all seen his kind of ascent, or he's on his ascent as a professional. A lot of people saying some really, really good things about him. But what is it about him that caught your eye in the amateurs, and how do you feel he's progressed so far as a pro?
He's just one of these fighters who he looks very at home in there. He's been boxing a long time. He was good as a junior, good as a youth. First time I saw him box from ringside was at the World Series boxing finals in Tashkent in 2016. And the British Lionhearts were boxing the Cuba Domadores, and Cuba sent a full-strength team, the team that they were going to send to the Olympics a couple of months later. So, you've got Erislandy Savon, you've got Lazaro Alvarez, Roniel Iglesias, Ioannis Argelagos, Arlen Lopez, Julio La Cruz. These are superstars with thousands of amateur fights between them and hundreds of WSB fights between them. And Dalton had never boxed as a senior at that point, I don't think. It was definitely his first WSB fight. And he was in with another one of them, the Asnier Toledo, who had got a bronze in London, multiple medals at World Championships, hundreds of fights, a couple of dozen WSB. And he gave him a good fight. You could have argued that he maybe nicked it, didn't get it on the cards. And I was just really, really impressed. And around the place that week as well, he was relaxed. He was looking forward to it. You could tell he looked like he belonged there, which, technically speaking, you could have argued that maybe he didn't. And ever since then, I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. And for the next Olympic cycle, which started basically straight after that, at 64 kilos, he was going to have Luke McCormack ahead of him because Pat moved up to 69. And I fancied him to overtake him by the time Tokyo came around, but he decided to turn pro because one reason was that with the Olympic weights they shaved it from 64 to 63, which might not sound like much, but it's 2.2 pounds, and it was already quite hard, and you've got to stay on it for 2 weeks. And he had some hand problems, and the way you're allowed to wrap your hands in the amateurs is very strict, whereas in the pros you could take a bit more care and protect yourself a bit more. So that's basically why I did it. And I was always just very keen to see how he would get on. And so far, so good.
You mentioned there his temperament, and it doesn't surprise me at all that you've said that, because one of the things that I was taken by him this week is, headlining in Sheffield. Sheffield, as we know over the years, has produced some great fighters. And, in recent years, your Kell Brooks, your Kid Galahad, so on and so forth. Obviously, going further back, Nassim Hamed, Johnny Nelson, and kind of those guys. But it's not really that kind of headliner attraction there at the minute in that part of the country, which is, still a very big city for boxing. So Dalton to kind of carry a show there and have, he had like the Ricky Hatton drums and all that. It was very, very good, but he never once really looked, fighters, as we've just discussed with Barry Jones, look out for that. Great liars and great at kind of hiding these things, but you just got the sense for me this week that he wasn't flustered at all by it, and I feel like we saw that in his performance as well. The early rounds in particular, the first round didn't really do an awful lot. We caught up with Dalton and Grant, which we'll show you shortly, and he said, making him work without doing much, staying nice and composed, and it seems to me like he has a wonderful temperament, and that's going to stand him in good stead as a pro. Yeah,
that exactly, and that's what I saw in that week in Uzbekistan. He doesn't waste very much. He punches hard enough, definitely. He's on you with that kind of front foot pressure. He makes that ring a pretty small place, and I just think the temperament in it is absolutely key. And he is somebody who looks like he's been doing this for a long time, because he has been doing it for a long time. Obviously, his dad training him. They've got a really tight bond, the pair of them. But it hasn't really surprised me how well he's done since I saw him that first time, because it's a pretty extreme situation that, you're going away to Uzbekistan, which is a long way, and okay, they're well-travelled, these guys, but that team they're up against there, they lost 9-1, by the way. Fraser Clarke got a win, but nobody else did. Most of the Olympians didn't go, so Team GB didn't do what Cuba did. Coley was there, Mo Ali was there, Galal was there, Galal Yafai. I think that was it of the first choices. But he was just, like I say, he just looked like he belonged there. He was happy to do interviews, all that kind of thing. He's not going to shout his head off about how great he is, but the confidence is real, and you can tell. And bit by bit, they'll just get more out of him. But like someone like Buatsi, you get fighters who they don't say an awful lot, and sometimes people regard that or look at that and think it means that they maybe lack some confidence, but it's just complete misreading of the situation. I find that the noisier somebody is, the less certain I am about their confidence levels. When you've got somebody who is happy to say pretty much nothing, I look at them and just think, wow, that is interesting, because you don't feel the need to say a lot. He probably needs to just build that side up a bit because it is a business. But I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years, 2.5 years maybe, he'll be 26, 27 at that point, that he'll be knocking on the door of boxing for world titles. I think that could happen.
Yeah, and by the sounds of things, he wants to win the British title outright. Whether or not he has the opponents to do that, I know trying to get an opponent for this wasn't the easiest thing to do, which is how they ended up with Samo Mason. But it's interesting to see where they match him at 140 pounds in particular. You'd imagine that there's going to be some opportunities to certainly climb the rankings and maybe fight for some belts. Josh Taylor, I mean, he's vacated 2 of the belts, and he's going to be boxing Jack Catterall come the end of the year. Who knows what happens with him after that? But there should be some routes to that for him. Going back to the fight this past weekend, you mentioned Samo Mason, incredibly game. I think it was fairly obvious fairly quickly that he may have been slightly out of his depth. The right hand was working a treat for Dalton Smith. It was almost, I think Brad Ray, shout out Brad Ray, said that Dalton Smith's the type of fighter that makes you scared to throw because you know what's coming back. And every time that southpaw jab came out from Samo Mason, the right hand was coming. He was looping it, was kind of whipping it round. And the third round, the first knockdown, was very heavy. I was very surprised to see Samo Mason not only get up but go a couple of rounds after that, which is obviously testament to his toughness. And it's a British title fight that he may not have, as you mentioned there with Harlem Eubank, there may have been more quote unquote deserving fighters contesting that belt. But still, he was in there, he was game, but he was just ultimately outgunned by Dalton Smith. Very impressive performance. I don't think there's really anything that you can take away from it negatively. Saw 1 or 2 people thinking that maybe he should have gone through the gears quicker, but that's not really his style.
No,
not really his style. He's very controlled, very relaxed, waits for the right opportunities, and he just gradually builds and builds and builds. He said to us, again, we're going to throw into it shortly, that he doesn't have any or many 1-round blowouts. It's very rare that he'll go in there and blow somebody out.
He has a look.
And that's a good trait, I think, to have in a prize fighter.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do, yeah. And I remember, I commentated on a few of his fights, and I remember one during lockdown. It was against a fighter from Birmingham whose name escapes me now.
Nathan Bennett?
It wasn't Nathan Bennett. It was another fighter who was cornered by John Pegg. And it was exactly that. It was one of the Wembley Arena ones. And he stalked him, had a look in the first round, began to land towards the end of the first round. I'll probably get the round number stoppage wrong, but second round, again, he built on it more and started to pick him apart. And John Pegg stopped the fight before his guy started to get really beaten up because he could see what was coming. And that's the guy you need in your corner when that's coming. But it was this like growing, building storm.
This is only going one way.
Yeah, this is only going one way. And I like that.
Lara Warrington undercut.
I think it might have been, yeah. But I just like that approach because, good fighters build into a fight. They'll look to establish the jab. Once they've done that, they'll look to put the right hand off the back of it. Once they've done that, they'll look to put a left hook on the back of that. They building blocks. And we're pretty high on him here at the minute. Who knows? That was British title level. I think it's a good idea. I think he's got to fight Casey Benjamin next. Yeah. The board have said. And we'll see what happens. You don't want to get too carried away with things, but just from what we've seen so far with the amateur pedigree as well, and pro boxing is so obviously for him, because one thing you don't know about top level amateurs when they turn pro is whether they're really going to embrace it, because it is still very different. It's just more painful, pro boxing. It's more brutal. There's no other way to say. It's longer, it's harder, the gloves are smaller, the punches hurt more, it's rougher, the referees don't get involved as much. And if you're up for that and you've got the kind of pedigree that he's got, then you've got every chance of really doing something. If you're not, then it doesn't matter how good you were as an amateur, you're probably not going to make it, because you have to have that bit of crazy that looks at that and just thinks, yeah, I felt that punch from that 8-ounce glove, which is so small you can barely get your hand in them. If you wear a few of them and think, yeah, no, this is just a bit of me, I'll come back for more of that, then, for me, there's something wrong with you. But there needs to be, because you won't make it otherwise.
Absolutely. And with that, let's hear from the new British super lightweight champion, Dalton Smith, who I was fortunate enough to catch up with the morning after his win over Samo Mason in Sheffield.
I think he took me around a round or so just to find the range, and then, you know, I think as the rounds went on, I just started breaking him down. And you know, I think that's what most of my performances have been like. You know, once I find their rhythm and their approach to the fight, and once I've got the rhythm and their movement, you know, that's when you see each round you see me chip away at them. And then I always say it's very rare you'll see me blast someone out in 1-2 rounds. You know, it takes me 1, 2, 3 rounds to catch the rhythm, catch the flow, suss out what they're doing, where they want to position themselves. And then if most of my stoppages have been like rounds 4, 5, 6, you know, because that's when I seem to step up the gas.
Right hand worked a treat. Dropped him with it in the 3rd round heavily. It was there for you pretty much every time you threw it after that. How significant was that shot? Was it something that you'd planned on specifically for Sam, or was it something that you'd worked out while you were in there?
To be honest, we never really worked on that shot. Because on Sam's previous fights, you know, he used to come out and go to my right. So if he used to come out and constantly go right. So we was expecting him, for me to commit, he was going to step back, dip low, and come round right. But obviously I just felt him, he was stepping back and leaning. Because his game plan was to make me fall short, he was just taking a little step back, but then he was pulling away with it. You know, so that's why I dipped down to the... I always seem to catch southpaws with it anyway. You know, I step through to my left and then bring it over. Because I felt it was leaning back. I think I tried it once in the 1st round, just came short. But yeah, once I got my range, you know, I couldn't miss with it.
You had him hurt in that 3rd round, as I've mentioned there. He got up, I think he had about 45 seconds or so to go to the end of the round. You tried him a little bit, but wasn't quite ready to go then. Yeah,
you know, it's full credit to Sam. You know, it shows he's trained his arse off for the fight. His conditioning was great. You know, because when he was going down, you know, I didn't think like he was going to get up the way he went down. You know, but then he kept bouncing back up. Don't know what kept him bouncing back up, but, you know, credit to him. But he, I think after the first knockdown, obviously the whole occasion, the crowd, you know, you get a little bit eager. You know, so I just sat back, enjoyed it, and then, you know, the stoppage eventually came.
So that was Dalton Smith. Dalton obviously very happy to wear that British title, the Lonsdale belt, as you mentioned before, something that many fighters grow up and dream of one day picking up. Mentioned to him there, it was a lovely moment with him giving that to his granddad. His granddad, a very close, tight knit. Obviously, it's a family affair. He's trained by his father, Grant Smith. But even that gym, they're all kind of young. Nico Levars, Junaid Bostan. I mean, Sonny Edwards is kind of the old man of the gym. Yeah, I know. It's mad, which feels very strange for us to say.
That. The older statesman.
Yeah, the older statesman, Sonny Edwards. But yeah, a great performance from Dalton Smith. And again, even in the interview, you just get the sense from him that he's not going to be carried away. He's happy, of course, but I think having Grant and knowing Grant, I don't profess to know him massively well, but what I do know about him, he's a very no-nonsense Yorkshireman, very specific type of person from that part of the world. My mum's family are all from Yorkshire.
But he's also he's also very realistic about the fact that these are young men and they do want to enjoy themselves. Because I remember sitting down for breakfast with him in Dubai back in March, and we were just chatting about stuff, and he just said to me, with younger fighters, when they turn pro, I say to them, listen, you know, you're getting some purses now. Maybe you're starting to make a little bit of money. If you want to go out and buy some stuff and do a few things, go and do it. Don't go crazy, but go and do it. But if you feel like you need to do that just to show people that, you know, I'm doing well and stuff like that, fine. But after a year, that's got to finish then. And I just think that's a good realistic approach, because you can't expect every single one of these fighters to not want to spread the money around a little bit. You know, it's a bit of a status symbol, isn't it? You know, get a car, get some clothes, whatever it is. You want people to know you're doing well. So he's realistic about it. He knows that they can't all be monks. But Dalton's just, you know, he's focused, and you don't see him making the kind of predictable but ultimately very human mistakes that a lot of athletes make, which is things just go to their head and they lose control of themselves and everything around them.
Yeah, very grounded young man, and which I think, as we mentioned there, you can see in his fighting style as well as his personality. One or two, I mean, we're going to tread lightly here because it is quite the comparison, but one or two Canelo Alvarez shouts about Dalton Smith. You can kind of see where it comes from. He's very patient. We mentioned to him in the interview, you know, he has that explosive power and that front foot pressure, and you know, he takes his time. He doesn't go out there and I think he can punch. Certainly he can punch his weight, but he doesn't go out there and look to blast guys out. It's more methodical and just upping the tempo each and every round. But yeah, one or two Canelo Alvarez comparisons. Can you see that?
Yeah, I know what people mean by it because, as you say, because of that style, almost everything lands, whether it's on your shoulder or your arm or your forearm or whatever it is, and it maybe just takes a little bit of a chip away from that energy bar. It's very effective what he does, and that's what it's always about, you know, effective aggression. And what Brad Ray said is pretty illuminating. It's you don't want to throw because you don't want to make a mistake because you know what will happen if you do. And that's, I remember me and Macklin doing that fight I spoke about. And we'd done a few of his fights, but that night in particular, we just thought, oh, this is, like, we could feel his pain, his opponent. You know, you could, Matt, like, particularly because obviously he's been in there. You know, you kind of like, you know where he experienced it against Gennady Golovkin, which is just like a horrible extreme. But you kind of, whatever the level is, it's kind of like, oh, I know what this feels like. And it's terrible. So yeah, I can understand the comparisons. But what people need to just be aware of when people make comparisons like that, you're not saying that he's going to go and achieve what he's achieved. It's just, but it's okay because it's a comparison that people will understand because they know who Canelo is. Yeah, you know, it's flattering, definitely.
Before we move on and hear from Grant Smith, it's very rare to hear from Grant Smith on camera.
Yes, it is.
I get one interview out of him every year.
You corner him somewhere, don't you?
Yeah, I did, yeah. I had to request that we get a second one in if Sonny Edwards boxes Martinez in Mexico. So if I'm coming to Mexico, I'm getting an interview. And you're like, oh, no.
Me and Macklin tried to get him on the podcast with Sonny at one point, and he just said, no, thanks very much for asking, but I'm going to just stay in the background. And then I think the week after he did the interview with you, and I messaged Sonny kind of joking, just saying, what's going on here? And he did say, I had a word with him about that. It was, I said, don't worry, Tebbutt will have cornered him in a restaurant having breakfast somewhere. No escape.
Funny story about that, and I'm going to repeat it here. So Sonny Edwards bet me £100 that I couldn't get the interview.
That was probably why he was so annoyed.
So Sonny owes me the £100. Thanks very much. Before we move on and we hear from Grant, one fight that's already being sort of started to be spoken about, and it's a fight that I would love to, and we all love to build these domestic rivalries almost before they've started, and this one certainly hasn't started. Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith down the line, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever. Of course, we're a long way away from that, but something to kind of cling on to and look ahead to. That's a fight that really excites me about the prospect of that happening one day.
Yeah, and there's no harm in doing it. You know, it's fun, isn't it? I can be a bit of a killjoy about stuff like that at times, but it's only because, you know, I think sometimes people will just make comparisons and things like that which just don't really have any particular value. But something like that, yeah, why not kind of entertain that down the line? Because of his age, Azim is going to go up in weight. Like it's going to happen, isn't it? He's an interesting one because there's a lot of noise and it is hype around him at the minute. But everybody who's seen him in the gym, including yourself, his trainer, Shane McGuigan, they all are confident that their confidence is justified. And yeah, of course, a long way to go. But for the long-term health of the sport, it's not a bad thing to identify these potential rivalries a way out and just kind of work on them a little bit. Just put it in people's heads, because then, you know, the fighters kind of get it in their head that, this is something that people want to see. This is something maybe when I get to a certain point, I need to try and make happen. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all, because rivalries are what this sport is based upon, really, isn't it? And if you want to have a lucrative career, particularly, boxing's littered with fighters who maybe weren't the best, but did really well financially out of their career because they found that person,
that dance partner.
Yeah.
With that being said, me being me, I went and spoke to Dalton Smith and Adam Azim over recent times. They, of course, shared a training camp with Luke Campbell in preparation for Ryan Garcia a while ago, so they are familiar with each other. Here's what they had to say about each other and a potential fight down the line.
He's a tremendous fighter. Like, he's a great fighter. He's fighting for the British title. So far, I'm not really looking towards that yet. I've got to deal with this year first. Obviously, if that fight comes down the line, obviously it's a great fight. But obviously, at the moment, he's a great fighter, a lovely kid as well.
Yeah, like I say, Adam's a great kid, great fighter. Both brothers are. I spent a bit of time with him down when they was. In fact, he was down. I was sparring Campbell for the Garcia fight. So, I've always known the Azim brothers. They're good talent, great fighters. We know of each other through the amateur scenes, even though he was a couple of years younger than me. So yeah, there are potential fights down the line, and like I said, the 140 division is packed with talent, packed with fighters. Just domestically. So, they're big fights down the line. We're both building on our careers now, and you never say never. But I rate the Azim brothers as they're good fighters, good talents.
So that was Adam Azim and Dalton Smith, kind of putting in those roadblocks for Smith Azim or Azim Smith. Don't want to take any sides. Down the line in 2027 for the undisputed £140 title. Just putting it out there. We could this sort of thing that we could maybe look back at.
Why not? It's 5 years.
In a few years' time. But yeah, a great fight, and leave them both to develop. Both very respectful of each other. As I said, I had that camp with Luke Campbell a while ago, which is the first time I actually saw Adam Azim. 18 years old, he kind of came in, dumped his bag, did a few stretches, and then sparred Luke Campbell, and it was just sort of like, whoa,
yeah,
what's gone on here? But yeah, two guys who have a lot of respect for each other. But back to Grant Smith, kind of the unassuming. I think the sort of sometimes you don't almost want to say it, like underrated trainer, but I feel like he's starting to now get the credit that his results certainly over recent years have has deserved, and indeed before then. But yeah, it's always a difficult one when you say, do you feel underrated, or is he an underrated fighter or trainer or whatever? What are people saying, that I'm not very good? But I think he's just starting to get that wider recognition now, that recognition from the wider boxing public.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think people who deal with boxing week to week, I think everybody's known for a long time that he's he's a very good trainer. You look at the stable of fighters he's got; they've achieved a lot over the last few years. He's interesting to talk to. He's perfectly friendly. Interesting backstory with them as well, because I remember, commentating on some of Dalton's early fights. So I didn't know a lot about Grant, so I was kind of checking him out, and he shouldn't be here because he got hit. He was out jogging one day in Sheffield in Meadowhall, I think, and he got hit by a 56-ton tram, and he shouldn't have made it, but he did make it. And I think it was after that he got, never give up on life, tattooed. Not sure exactly where, but Dalton's got the same tattoo now as well. I think he was pestering his dad to get it for a while, and so that's one reason why that kind of brought them closer together. I think he's just quite an interesting guy, really. But I don't think it would bother him being asked that question, because he genuinely doesn't care about the kind of fame and fortune side of it. Often people say they don't, but actually they do. And you can tell that they do. They're just doing the whole humble bragging thing. He's not one of them.
No, absolutely not. And that's kind of where with the no-nonsense Yorkshireman, he cares about his boxers and his boxers winning, and if he can train his boxers to be better fighters and they can win titles, then that's enough for him. I think interesting side note to the story about the tram, I think he discharged himself from hospital 2 days later,
right,
which kind of gives you a sign of who Grant Smith is a man. But enough of me and Andy talking about him. Here's what he had to say in Sheffield this past weekend.
I was speaking to somebody last night after, and I says, how many dads in Sheffield, as a boxing coach as well, have come and enjoyed these nights with their son? How many can say that they've done this in Sheffield like this? How many dads? And I felt honoured and proud that it was my son that had done that for his dad and his granddad and his grandmother and the rest of the family. And the family are proud. We're all proud of him anyway. Not just the gym's proud of him, the family's proud of him, Sheffield, he's done everybody proud.
You're quite, I think you'll forgive me for saying it, you're quite a no-nonsense Yorkshireman. My mum's side of the family are all from Yorkshire. You remind me of some of my relatives. But it's nice to hear you talk like this. We don't always hear you kind of speak like that. You are, how do I put this, something of a taskmaster in the gym, I think it's fair to say. But great to hear you talking like that so openly. Do you allow yourself to kind of feel that on the night, or is it something that you have to try and kind of put to one side and focus on the task at hand?
No, I feel that, obviously. and I do show it. Not too often, but I do show it. But I am a big softie at heart. But when it comes to the business of boxing, or any type of business or work or whatever, I think everything should be 110%. And if I'm giving 110%, I think everybody else who's working with me should do the same. And I'm not money orientated. It's not about the money, it's about the success for me. And like I've always said to Dalton, the boxers that chase the money early don't normally get it. Go for the achievements. The achievements should be the goal. And the goals are the belts, which become belts. Then belts will fetch you money. Take pride in the belts. Chase the belts, not the money. And the financial rewards will come.
So that was the all too rare interview with Dalton Smith's father and trainer, Grant Smith. Speaks really well about the sport. I mean, it's a shame that he does interviews so infrequently, but also I actually said this to Sonny Edwards a couple of days ago, that because he makes you really work for getting those nuggets out of him and getting his perspective on things and his insight into how his boxers are trained and how they've developed in the gym is always, it's that extra valuable. It's all the more sweeter for the juice is sweet for the squeeze, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think any time you have to really do some graft to get somebody to sit down with you, you always feel like you need to make the most of it. And with someone like him, what you're not going to get is some kind of psychobabble. You ask them a question and you will get an answer. It might not be the longest answer in the world, which again makes you work, because you can't just sit there and relax and just think, well, I can just ask him anything. He knows the crack, he understands the drill. He'll just give me 2 or 3 minutes. Might not really say a lot, but happy days. That's not what this is about. That's not what your job's about. And I remember when I used to cover football, certain people were hard work, and you always had to have your next question ready. You want to respond to the answer they've just given you, but sometimes they would just dead bat it and not really want to talk, and you've got to be ready to go and ready to go and ready to go, and even play that game sometimes where they stop talking and look at you and you just don't say anything and look at them, and then they start talking again. It's, you do this a lot more than me, but that's the challenge, isn't it? And that's what makes, I think, doing those kinds of interviews enjoyable, because it's not like he's doing it under massive duress. He just doesn't want to do it too often, because then he's a fair guy. He realises that he's probably going to have to do everybody, and then before you know it, you're doing it every day, your fight week, with 6 or 7 different people, and I can completely understand why he wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad enough speaking to me, let alone 6 or 7 people like me. I'm only joking. There's nobody like me. But anyway, moving away from the main event and talking about the rest of the card, Sandy Ryan got her revenge over Erica Farias. She righted the wrong of a few months ago. I thought it was a good performance from Sandy Ryan. Got to work behind the jab, which is something I feel like she massively neglected in the first fight, and was able to win a competitive but clear decision.
Yeah, I just rate the fact that she wanted to go straight into the rematch, and at that stage of your career, you should want to, I think. I don't think she would have been happy with the way she performed in the first fight, and I think she would have learned an enormous amount from it. And taking that fight early in her pro career, the first time around, was a good, bold statement. I remember thinking at the time, the fact that she lost just didn't matter. So long as she responded to it in the right way, those 2 fights that she's had with Farias, they're going to teach her more than 10 against lesser opponents. The L doesn't matter. And I think in female boxing, that's truer than it is in male boxing. Quite a lot of fighters have lost or have got numerous defeats. The only one I can think, 2 I can think of. 3, Savannah Marshall hasn't lost as a pro, but Shields and Taylor are undefeated. Amanda Serrano's lost a fight. It was a while ago, but it happened. And you get some fighters who have lost a few fights, and it doesn't make us think any the less of them because they've taken them at a good level. So yeah, I was pleased to see that, because it was the right thing to do to take the rematch. But you've got to get it done, and she got it done.
Yeah, and I think she clearly learned from some of her mistakes. I think by her own accord, and she sort of said it publicly. She crashed the weight the first time. Maybe wasn't.
These are the things you learn, aren't
yeah, and maybe wasn't as diligent in her preparation as she was certainly for the rematch. She was lean.
they? That won't happen again.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's better to do it now than do it when you get it's unthinkable to any athlete that they would make that kind of mistake, but it happens all of a sudden. Maybe something happens in camp and you can't go running that day, or you get a little injury and your weight's a little bit higher than you want it to be, and then something else happens, and then you find yourself in a position where you have to do that. It might have been self-inflicted. You might just have been a little bit lackadaisical. I don't know, but these are valuable lessons learned.
Speaking of valuable lessons learned, I'm wary of the time, so I have to kind of shoot through this. Jordan Thompson versus Vergil Ortiz. Now, going into that, I felt like that was a very, very ambitious
me too.
fight for him to take that. Yeah. And so it proved. I felt like Jordan Thompson boxed very, very well for sort of 8.5 rounds. I mean, he was talking in the week about, I'm going to blow him out in 2 rounds, and Vergil Ortiz, he just doesn't happen.
Going to happen.
Just doesn't happen. And
I heard him say that, and when I heard him say that, I just thought, ooh,
if you try
don't try and do that,
because
you'll gas and have a kind of lower level David Haye, Carl Thompson scenario on your hands, basically.
Which we might be not in the similar kind of sense of the way the fight went until then, but it got pretty hairy for the last 4 minutes or so.
Yeah,
of that, like the end of the 9th round, he got caught with a shot, and talking about the rounds before then, because I think it's important that we talk about what he did well, and he did a lot of things well in that fight. I felt like he was very good behind the jab. I thought he varied the jab very well. Sometimes he was flicking with it, sometimes he was stepping in with it. He caught Ducar with some good shots. I think in the 5th round he knocked the gum shield out, but he never got carried away. And whether or not in the week, he said after the fight, I hit him with some good shots early and I thought this guy's not going anywhere, so I adjusted, or whether or not he thought, he was just going to ham it up before, I'm going to do this, do that, and he always knew. Whatever it was, he boxed well. He was disciplined. He didn't waste any shots. When he had him hurt, he tried him and then thought, okay, he's not ready to go, let's get back to the jab. I thought it was all very, very good until the last probably 30, 45 seconds of the 9th round. He got hurt against the ropes and he kind of languished against the ropes, and Ducar caught him with some good shots, and at the start of the 10th round he hadn't recovered, and it almost went dramatically and drastically wrong at the end of the 10th round. It
did, but in a way you could argue, because he did manage to come through it, that what a great fight
absolutely
to have, because again, how much is he going to learn from that? He's had that experience now, which sometimes it can take a really long time for a fighter to have that kind of experience, and it's not necessarily something that you would. It's strange because you talk to boxers about this and they kind of do and don't want things like that to happen. They're aware on the way up that they're going to need a real tough gut check fight. It's not really what you want, but you need to be prepared to go there and do whatever it takes to win. So it's this kind of strange relationship they have with kind of like pain, basically, fighters. They do and don't want it. But he's done it now. But I thought that was, when I saw that fight announced, I thought, oh, hello, that's interesting, because we saw him give Chris Smith a good fight, a hard 10 rounds during one of those lockdown shows. And I saw him in Dubai in March against Mike Perez.
Yeah.
And he got stopped eventually. Perez was well on top, putting it on him. And then again, I think he thought, God, this guy's tough, and I'm not sure this is going to happen. So he kind of stepped off for 2 or 3 rounds, and then he went again towards the end and eventually got the stoppage. But he is a hard man, Vergil Ortiz. He really is.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the names that he's lost to. He's lost to Kevin Lerena by decision. Kevin Lerena, I don't think he's the best fighter in the world, but he can punch.
Yeah.
Alexei Egorov.
Yeah.
How good Alexei Egorov is. Chris
Yeah.
Smith. Mike Perez. I mean, I can't remember the other guy that he lost to, not of the same standing as those, but Mike Perez, massively seasoned amateur. He's boxed as a heavyweight.
He's an unbelievable Nick Perez these days.
Yeah. I mean, at cruiserweight, he looks unbelievable.
Yeah.
Remember when he used to box a heavyweight? I mean, he was, I'm not one to talk, but he was carrying some extra poundage, should we say, at heavyweight. But at cruiserweight, he's a specimen.
Oh, he is unbelievable.
So yeah, a very, very. A very good experience overall. Just to follow on what you've said there, like, fighters don't want that. I think more than anything, there's this air of invincibility. I'm not going to get dropped. I'm not going to have to go to the trenches. But you do need to, and you need to do it at that level before you get to a title level or a title fight, and then it happens, and then you don't know what to do. So he will take the experience from that. But yeah, there was a split second when the bell went when he was down, and then there was a split second, I think, when the count got to 5 or 6, where I thought, oh, he might not get up here. and he got up at 9 3/4.
Yeah.
And was able to see it off. But no, good learning fight for him. We also saw the continued development of Campbell Hatton as a pro. Went the distance again against Mikhail Dufek, somebody that we've seen over here before. He's boxed at a decent level. Young Campbell, still very early in the stages of his career, but I mean, considering when he boxed and what time he boxed, and the fact you're in Sheffield and not Manchester, still has that, Hatton-esque support.
Yeah, he does. And I did feel for him in the early stages because he got the kind of platform and spotlight that surname is always going to attract. And I just remember that fight he had on the Usyk Joshua Usyk undercard at Spurs, and he lost that fight. I think I had it 5-1. I was doing the card for Sky, and it wasn't difficult to score really. And at that point, everybody was saying the same thing. It's not like it's just some kind of searing insight, but people were saying that what they need to do with him now is get him on one of these Italy or Spain shows, and which they did, and kind of take him away from that level of heat. Because I don't think anyone can really prepare you for it. No. Because to start with, you get a load of love because everybody loves your old man, and then it doesn't take very long for people to start telling you you're shit and you don't deserve the platform and you're a fraud and you're this and you're that. And I don't care who you are, particularly if you're young. You can pretend all you want that it doesn't affect you, but that is going to hurt, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to hurt to make you question everything. So they just need to keep him fighting regularly, and we'll see what happens. That's the same for everybody, but particularly with him.
Final one on the Matchroom card. The Bosch army were out in full force in Sheffield. Wherever he goes, he takes this army of people around you, and you spend 2 minutes, not even that, 30 seconds in his company away from the fight, and you can see why. Yeah. You can see how he's able to garner such massive support so early in his career. And, he's had a little bit of time out in between his last fight. He'd done his hand, and it's just given a little bit of time to develop in the gym with Mark Tibbs and Jimmy Tibbs, two very experienced in Jimmy's case, in the gym and working with him. He's still very much a work in progress, Johnny Fisher, but another stoppage win and another successful night for the Bosch army, Andy.
Yeah, and he's exactly the same. He's not. He's got a lot of attention on him, like Campbell Hatton has, but in a completely different circumstance, because he's managed to just create this fan base himself, which is it's that kind of magic dust that everybody's after. I don't know how you do that, because I was talking to a fighter about this a while ago, and I remember just thinking to myself, how many people could I have got to come and watch me do something when I was, say, in my early 20s, if I'd been like, even in a band, say, how many people could you get to come and watch you? Plenty of people will say they'll come, but how many will actually come? And I thought, God, maybe could have got 20 people. Maybe. And then he's got 1,500.
And they're travelling from everywhere. They'll go wherever for him.
Yeah, and he is a very engaging bloke. You see him around at shows. He goes to plenty of shows. I've seen him at quite a few Sky shows. And, he's got the university background, history degree. There's plenty of interesting stuff there. And good luck to him, because heavyweight boxing is no joke. I was covering the card in Newcastle the week before, and Steve Robinson was on it.
Yeah.
And Steve did great, marketing himself as the Disney Drago, as he calls himself now. And he did all of that, and he understands the need for that. And he won a fight on Sky, and then he lost a fight. And as soon as he lost a fight, people would tell him, and he was a gimmick, and he was this, and he was that. There's nothing gimmicky about being a boxer, particularly not a heavyweight boxer. Yet you can be protected, but a heavyweight particularly, what they're doing in there is anyone is capable of turning your lights out. They've got to be careful with Johnny Fisher. I think they will be, but it's going to be a great ride. It's going to be a great ride. And he's not saying he's going to be a world champion, and it doesn't matter if he isn't a world champion. It doesn't matter if he never wins a major title. He's fun, and there's room for that always. And who knows? Maybe he will go on to be a really good fighter and win titles.
Who knows? But he does have a sizable following, which can only help things at this stage. So before I move on, he'll love this. Can you give him a Bosch just into your camera? Just one Bosch, just a little Bosch.
Bosch.
There we go. Great Bosch there from Andy Clarke. Before we wrap things up, of course, there was another fight stateside this past weekend. Our very own Michael McKinson real tough fight. We all knew that it was going to be a tough fight going out there against, you know, kind of one of the heir apparents of the stacked 147-pound division in Vergil Ortiz Jr. Gave a good account of himself, Michael McKinson. I think we all knew that he would go out there and he'd be fiddly, he'd be crafty and be awkward, which he proved to be at times, but ultimately just outgunned by what I believe is one of the two special talents at 147 pounds, along with Jaron Ennis, in Vergil Ortiz Jr.
Yes, and I would agree with that. But I was really happy for McKinson, because I think it's a great example of, even though he lost, really he won. Because I don't think anybody expected him to beat Ortiz Jr. I don't think it was realistic at all to expect that to happen, because, as you say, he is that good. But McKinson is somebody who's kind of done things the hard way. He was always been bred for pro boxing, basically, by his dad, Michael Ballingall. He had him sparring pros when he was young, so he had, you know, he came through a tough route in the gym. But they always had a lot of belief in him. Hit and don't get hit. You know, he's got that kind of style. He's technically a very adept fighter. Never really had that much backing until now. No one ever really wanted to fight him. Mikey the Problem, and that's a good nickname for him, because he would always be a problem. But he really wanted this fight. And even when it didn't happen in March, he still wanted it, because he believes in himself. And it just shows what you can do if you really do believe in yourself, and you know you've done the work in the gym, and you know you've got that behind you, and you've got a corner who knows what they're doing. And that was always going to be important in a fight like that they get him out of there, or it doesn't go on too long, or I think they all got everything right. It was just he couldn't beat Ortiz, and that's fine, because not many people are going to be able to. But he's got that badge of honour that he went deeper than anybody else has yet.
Absolutely. And look, I think you hit the nail on the head, where he comes out of it with his reputation enhanced.
Big time.
Speaking to some of our American colleagues and what have you, and didn't know an awful lot about Michael McKinson, you sort of say to him, look, he started at the smallest of the small halls.
Yeah.
He's not from a boxing town or a boxing part of the UK in Portsmouth. And he's had to take hard fights against unbeaten guys as the B-side.
Always away.
Even as recently as Chris Congo.
Yeah.
Like the Chris Congo fight, that was on a Dillian White show when Dillian White was managing Chris Congo.
It was on the pay-per-view, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was the Rumble on the Rock, as it was dubbed. I mean, it's not the worst nickname for a show. Not far off, though. But anyway, Michael McKinson really did an awful lot right in his career up to that point, and you always want somebody. I actually watched the fight with was a few of us kind of huddled around my laptop in Sheffield, and watched it with Lee Eaton, who of course has had him, he manages him now, and has had him for an awful long time. And sort of said to Lee, look, regardless of what happens in this fight, before the fight, you've done a great job to get him to the position that he's got to, and to get this big fight against somebody like Vergil Ortiz. It is fantastic, and it really showcases all of the good things about the sport, and the fact that all I wanted from that fight for McKinson was to go out there and show people that he was capable of at least hanging in there and competing to a level, whether or not he won the fight or not. What I didn't want is him to go out and get blown away in a round or two, and then everybody just says, "Oh, who's this guy?"
No, you wanted him to show his skill set. You know, we've had a kind of comparable fight recently with Alim Kanuli and Danny Dignam, and you know, it was just too much for Danny on the night. It was just too much, and it was a painful watch, and you don't want to see that kind of thing. But I think it's a lesson to others as well that, you know, if you do believe in yourself, then go and see what you can do. But look at Kieran Conway, like he's boxing on the Triple G Canelo undercard.
He's like a mainstay of Canelo Alvarez undercard. Recently. He boxed against Suleiman Sissoko.
That's it. He's happy to take that fight. That was a hard fight. Didn't win it, but he believes in himself.
Give a good account of himself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, stock rose, and there he is again. He's going to be there on the night, and that's, you know, he wants to go on and win. Be a world champion. Everybody wants to go on and be a world champion, but you've got to have that belief that you can perform on that level and that you're not going to freeze. And if you lose, then you lose. You know, that's that. You train hard, you turn up on the night, you do your thing, and whatever happens, happens.
Before we wrap things up, who next for both Michael McKinson and Vergil Ortiz Jr.? Who do you want to see for either of them?
I think Ortiz is in that kind of difficult position at the minute where
He keeps calling that Terence Crawford. That's not.
Well, the problem he's got is that anyone around him, why would you want to fight him? he's probably going to have to wait for a mandatory, isn't he? He's got good backing, obviously, but you're not going to fight him unless you have to. Not that you would be scared of him. It's just if you're Crawford or Spence, but
they want to fight each other.
They've
That's
got massive fights. They want to fight each other. So I don't know is the honest answer to that one. With McKinson, I mean, I would love to see him win a British title. I would love to see him win a British title.
I think he could as well. I think I'd make him a favourite against Echo Esserman.
Yeah,
I think
he's
now
boxing Sam Antwi on the Joyce Parker undercard, and no, Pat McCormack's trying to target a British title fight as soon as he can. But I'm sure McKinson, would love that too. Get win that Lonsdale belt. Like I said, it still means a hell of a lot.
I'm going to throw a couple of names out there. Blair Cobbs had a win this past weekend.
Yeah, of course,
against Morris Hooker. That's
Yeah.
I think DAZN maybe have him back and Golden Boy and what have
Yeah.
you. Also, there's Alexis Rocha, who's with Golden Boy.
Blair
and
Cobbs
DAZN
is the
as well.
obvious one, actually.
Blair Cobbs, I think that'd be a good little fight.
Yeah.
Good win over Morris Hooker. But anyway, we can't talk about it because we've run out of time. As always, Andy, thanks very much for joining us today, not only for this review show, but also our preview show for Usyk Joshua 2. Keep your eyes peeled for that on the ID Boxing YouTube channel. Please, again, like, comment, and subscribe. As always, Andy, real pleasure. Thanks very much for coming along today.
Always a pleasure.
And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks very much.